And that was the whole nature of good and evil. Where did it come from? How are we ended up, did we ended up where we're at with so much evil taking place? So I read you the letter from Cardinal Vignano, our Archbishop, and he talked about the children of light and the children of darkness. Well, let's take a little further look, and we're going to do so by exploring more, just like we did yesterday when we were looking at the Nephilim. We're going to go back and look at some sources that are to be found biblically and in some of the apocryphal texts. Okay, the first place we're going to start off with, and bear with me here, I'm putting together a story, so all these pieces will fit together as we move along. Okay, this is from the Nag Hammadi Library. It's a great source. These are stories that as you read through them, you'll find are very similar. Many of parts of these stories are very similar to what is in the Bible. Though that these texts were not found until 1945, there's obviously connection that there's so much cohesion between these stories. So I want to read the opening part of this. This is from a book called The Revelation or Apocalypse of Adam. The Fall of Adam and Eve. The revelation that Adam taught his son Seth in the 700th year, saying, "Listen to my words, my son Seth. When God created me out of the earth, along with your mother Eve, I went about with her in a glory that she saw in the eternal realm for which we came. She taught me knowledge of the eternal God, and we resembled the great eternal angels, for we were higher than the God who created us and the powers with him whom we did not know. God, the ruler of the realms and the powers, divided us in wrath, and then we became two beings. And the glory in our hearts left us, me and your mother Eve, along with the first knowledge that breathed in us. And glory fled from us and entered another great realm. Your mother Eve and I didn't come from this realm, but knowledge entered into the seed of great eternal beings. For this reason I myself have called you by the name of that person who is the seed of the great generation or its predecessor. After those days, the eternal knowledge of God of truth withdrew from me and your mother Eve. Then we learned about the inanimate as we did about human beings. We recognized the God who created us. We were not strangers to his powers, and we served him in fear and slavery. After these events, our hearts darkened, and I slept in my heart's darkened thought." Okay, that's kind of a phrase that stands out, right? So I want you just to kind of be aware of this. We're talking about serving in fear and slavery. Okay? So let's take that and let's now go and take a look at the story of Cain and Abel. Because we hear, well, let me just get to it here rather than trying to explain it first. "And Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought the fruit of the ground in offering unto the Lord, and Abel also brought of the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and his offering. But unto Cain and his offering he had no respect, and Cain was very wroth, and in his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou dost well, thou shalt not be accepted. And if thou dost not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, and when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not, for am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which had opened her mouth to receive your brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out of this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said to him, Whoever shall slay Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod in the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. And he builded a city and called the name of the city after his son, Enoch. And Enoch was born into Irad, and Irad begat Methuselah, and so on and so on. Okay? Now, what I want to point out to you is something interesting. Did say we're in the 700th year, time has gone by. But at this point, we're told from the biblical story, there was Adam, and there was Eve, and there was Cain, and there was Abel. Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. Okay? Now, suddenly in this story here, we have Cain is going to the land of Nod where he meets his wife. Where did she come from? Cain is concerned when he speaks to the Lord that he is going to be killed. It shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. Who? Who is the everyone? And so it brings up questions. Why are there other beings described or mentioned that are not part of the official story of Adam and Eve? Leads us to wonder if there was someone more, some other beings that maybe came along first. Here is John chapter 8. We're going to scroll down here, and we're getting down to, let's see, we'll start off at 40. It says, But now ye seek to kill me. Wait, let me back up 39. 38. I speak that which I have seen with my Father, and ye do that which ye have seen with your father. They answered him and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said unto them, If ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. But now ye seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. Ye do the deeds of your father. Then said they to him, We be not born of fornication, we have one Father, even God. And Jesus said unto them, If God were your Father, ye would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Even because ye cannot hear my word. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not. Well, those are kind of strange words. Why is Jesus telling these groups of people that he is from God and they are from the devil? Very interesting, isn't it? But if we look at the other stories and we go to the land of Nod, where we have these beings that met up with Cain when he went there, maybe these beings are a different type of being than the beings of Adam and Eve. Maybe there was something about them. Maybe they came along and needed to be moved away out of the garden before the Adam and Eve story. Okay? But there's something different about them. Let me continue on. Well, what I'm going to suggest here, well, no, let me continue on so we can tie it together more. Here we have a breakdown, Genesis 1:2. The earth became chaotic and wasted, And darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Please do understand that God did not create the earth in the beginning in a chaotic, wasted, dark state submerged underwater. The earth became like that because a massive cataclysmic change took place on the earth between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Okay, so now if we're looking at things from that perspective, we've got prior to Genesis 2, we have a previous race that was there, and there was something up with that race that might have had some issues or some problems, and they were put off into the land of Nod, and they weren't included in the story of Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve, well, they have two kids, Cain and Abel. One of these kids was considered to be the pure blood. That was Abel. Cain wasn't considered to be pure blood. Cain came, as she said, because the Lord gave her a son. If we look through other texts that are out there, some of the other apocryphal texts and other things in the Nag Hammadi, we begin to see that this wasn't such a the Lord gave me a child has a little bit more meaning when you start to see this being claiming to be God wasn't necessarily a good guy, and that Eve was raped by this being claiming to be God and then was kicked out of the garden. How else could you explain that Cain, who's supposedly of the divine, powerful, all benevolent God, how could Cain come out as the first murderer? And why then, as Cain's lineage evolved, later would Jesus refer to those as being from the father, the devil, the liar? This takes us into stories of Satan, which the Nag Hammadi then refers to as this being of Yaldabaoth. It's a big, big story. We've gotten into it before. I would just suggest you consider these possibilities of something that was going on. The Anunnaki fall into the story here. Here we have the Anunnaki and the creation of the black-headed people. Fallen angels in the Nephilim. The Anunnaki came to Earth for gold from planet Nibiru. The Anunnaki workers were overburdened and wanted Enki, one of the leaders, to make a slave race to mine the gold for them. People have questioned exactly who were these fallen angels in the Nephilim. The Anunnaki, ancient ones, and the creation of the black-headed people. The question arises because people confuse the story of the fallen angels coming down to earth as if it was Satan and his followers, and it happened in the beginning. The belief and confusion is further compounded by the fact the story continues with earth human women already existing. Basically amounts to different stories of the Sumerian tablets in the Christian Bible being confused as to the true sequence of events and facts, which, if known, would place these stories in order, resulting in less confusion. I personally despise the Anunnaki as a wholly, immoral, egotistical, ruthless, and conniving race of alien humanoids. They are advanced technologically, but very immature emotionally. The problems they caused on Earth were the repercussions of their own doing. In other words, the terrible things that happened on Earth were the direct result of the way that they lived and conducted their lives and interactions with others. The absolute worst of it was that every time they did things that resulted in problems, they shifted the blame and killed the humans, never once thinking or taking blame for their own troubles they themselves created. If you have not viewed or read the tablets of Enki and Ostrasis, then you should start there. One Anunnaki leader would not grant a privilege to another Anunnaki, so the later thought of being offended and sought revenge. They would seek help in the revenge, and that led to more Anunnaki involved in some trickery or war between the so-called gods. This happened often between the gods. A reasonable person would think that they would stop at all the nonsense, at least when the giants started devouring humans, but no, the entire debacle came only to a head when the use of several of what would call atomic bombs were used. As you will see, the situation with the fallen angels and the Nephilim is no exception to the depravity of the Anunnaki gods. It became so complicated, it's hard to understand. It is said that the Anunnaki were tall, about 7-8 feet. They can be seated in the pictures with helmets that have horns. The Earthlings are also seen as shorter with helmets without horns. If a person stood, he would be a couple of feet taller than the others. Since his eye level in the picture, he would be the distance from the middle of the knees up to the hips or taller. Enki, an Anunnaki leader, after creating Adam and Eve, originally sterile, and others created that could reproduce, had sexual relations with two earthling human women. The woman bore children, a male and a female. The male and the female offspring by Enki and the earthling human had intelligence. I have not seen any writings where they are described as being taller or living longer. The male child was named Adapa, the female was named Titi. These offspring were called Adamite humans. There is a story the wind had been blowing for several days, and the Adapa was tired of it, wishing it would stop. It stopped. Enki impregnated these two earth human women with his own selfish reasons. I do not think that he was successful. He had hoped in creating good, pure human race, so he cheated. He mated with two earth human women to improve the human bloodlines. He then claimed the children were of the earth human man and woman. He later confessed his treachery to his brother. Enki's brother, the Anunnaki Earth commander Enlil, was furious at learning of this and wanted to kill his brother, but he did not. The creation of humans, not to mention the mixing of their blood with humans, was taboo to him. My assumption of the not creating perfect species of humans is evidence about the amount of afflictions with which humans can be born, or a human man or woman can produce strikingly different offspring from each birth. Lord Pi has done and is doing work in this area. The Adamite humans, Adapa and Titi, mated. Their offspring were the twins Cain and Abel, Cain and Abel. They were the first Adapa-Pite humans. They were the first generation of humans with human offspring, but with some direct Anunnaki blood in their parents. After the Earth humans were created, 200 Anunnaki men, sometimes called Gigi or Watchers, came down to Earth from the Mars Gold Relay Station to attend a wedding. They had heard of the Earth woman and decided to abduct or kidnap some of their wives before they left Mars. They too had offspring. These offspring were giants or the Nephilim. Okay, so there's a lot more to this. The point of the matter is, now you've got a whole nother element thrown into this mix of the Anunnaki, and you've got the story of Enlil and Enki. And Enlil and Enki seem to be the story that show these two different sides of, could be written as one God with two different sides, and that could describe how in our Bible we have one God that is, wrathful in one hand, and then he's this other type of way. Because perhaps the original story, it was two beings. Either way, we see that there was one bloodline that came from one of these beings, and perhaps a bloodline from the other beings, which then gives rise to why Jesus would then say what he said about, you're of the devil, you're different, you're not from the same bloodline. Okay? And finally, we're going to take a look at, this last book here. This is the book called The Curse of Canaan. And the Curse of Canaan gives us some things we should really be looking at. Let's start here on page 6. The whole book's, it's really a great book and helps you understand a historical perspective of things. We're going to go to this chapter right here, or this modern day events can be understood only if we trace their implications in a direct line from the earliest records of antiquity. These records concern pre-Adamic man, a hybrid creature whose origins are described in ancient books. The Book of Enoch, which itself is part of an earlier book of Noah written about 161 BC, that says that Samaziah, Satan, the leader of the band of 200 angels, descended on Mount Carmel. They had lusted after the daughters of men from afar, and now they took them for wives. These fallen angels, known as the Order of the Watchers, taught their wives magic. The issue of these unions was a race of giants known as Nephilim. Okay, let's go to page 9. And they say, having been warned of God's impending catastrophe, Noah succeeded in building the ark, one of the greatest engineering feats of all time. Weighing 36,750 tons, it was built entirely of wood, 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet in depth. On this ark, God commanded Noah to take of every living thing all flesh, because of the limited space on the ark. There could be no possibility of further reproduction of these species during their time abroad, and God commanded that no intercourse should take place. The commandment was violated by an inhabitant of the ark, Ham, the second son of Noah. Ham had intercourse with a pre-Adamic woman of the ark, a dark-skinned person. Their offspring was a black son named Cush, who later became a symbol of Ethiopia. Jump down to page 14. It says Egyptian civilization reached its peak during the reign of Shem. Shem was another one of Noah's sons. The Sphinx is now admitted to be a portrait of him, of Shem. After his death, the priests not only resumed their evil practices, but they embarked on a successful campaign to black out his name from recorded history, a campaign which has largely succeeded during the ensuing 3,000 years. They also launched terrible punitive actions against Shem's fair-haired descendants, often murdering them or burning them alive. Not only did the priests falsify the records of Shem, but they also succeeded in eliminating most of the subsequent history of his fair-skinned descendants, the Shemites, or as they are sometimes called, the Semites. And finally, let's jump down here to page 47. Here we go. All right, we're getting there. Here we go, 47. The essential ingredient of humanism, hatred, can be traced back to its source, the demon worshippers of Baal in ancient history, the Canaanites. They come from the lineage of Cain, who indulged their appetite for human sacrifice in the name of religion, cannibalism in the rite of honoring their gods, and child murder in the name of Moloch. These are the same Canaanites who operate the great nations of the world today, and who eagerly look forward to more of the massacres which they have perpetuated in the 20th century, and which has made our time the scene of the greatest mass murders in the history of mankind. Okay, so what we have here is a story. When you put it all together, you have a story that shows that prior to Adam and Eve, the biblical story that we know, there was another race. This race had a different color to it than the Adam and Eve race. Why was there a different color? Maybe there was a different mixture that was done. Maybe there was a different way. Maybe it was something as simple as the first race was created, and then there was some sort of genetic flaw that was determined. And so when the second race was created, in order to just be able to tell the difference between the two of them, you make it a different color. We all do that when we do things, color coding things. Then you make another one, and that way you understand. It doesn't mean that one particular color is bad. It was just a way of separating your different groups so that you could understand that this group here is the group, and within this group there is some issue that has to be worked out on a DNA level. In this group over here, they've got this issue that's being dealt with. And I think as time has gone by, we've had so much mixing between the races that we no longer can look simply at a group and understand where that evil seed is that exists. Because in the past, maybe when there was a smaller amount that was made in these different groups, it was easier to say those of this group here had the genetic flaw. But when we're now millions and millions more people, and the colors and the race mixing and all has gone on, you can no longer differentiate and say there's something based on the skin colors. It's something much deeper in a genetic level. And that deeper place is what we're looking for, that serpent seed, because that is what passes on from one life and one being to the next, to the next, to the next. And so that lineage is passed on, as it just said. The Canaanites, that lineage of Cain, it didn't get wiped out because when the flood came along, Noah's son took one of these pre-Adamite women from this group where there was a flaw, something within the DNA. And so he took this, and it didn't get wiped out. It continued on, and that lineage kept going. And that lineage was a lineage that continued to bring throughout history the problems that you just heard, of the trafficking of children, the human sacrifice, all kind of other perversions that were going on because there was a flaw in that genetic makeup. And once that flaw was, once it's understood what it is, now we can kind of, like Jesus said in there, understand that there are those who have this particular predisposition to doing things one way because of the DNA, and those who the other way. In the same way that the article by the Archbishop talked about the children of light versus the children of darkness. So if we really dig in, we begin to understand on a deeper level. There's a lot more going on for us to understand than what meets the eye. A whole lot more for us to understand than what meets the eye, and we need to dig and understand. Jesus said we need to seek to find. The Bible itself is a very important book. It is a book that is filled with the inspired words of God. However, that book was written by men. They put it in the final format. And those men were fighting, and they were arguing and trying to figure out what they were going to put in. They had political reasons. They had agendas. Jesus was murdered by those who didn't want him to speak. Do you think after they got done murdering Jesus, removing him from the scene, do you think they said, hey, let's get together, let's take everything he said, put it in a book and give it to people so they can read it? Probably not. So the stories that we were told might not actually be the full stories. They might be distortions. Whereas some of those fighting to put the truthful information were putting it in. So we have a book that is filled with stories that may have some manipulations to the stories. So we have to seek deeper into that material to find out what is the truth. What is the truth within those stories? If we seek, we can find. And that's why we got to look through all these other sources as well, because it tells a bigger picture. And as you can see, the bigger picture involves not only what's going here in humankind, but it involves another race of beings, the Anunnaki, and those stories, how they mirror the stories that we have in our biblical stories. So there's something more. Now, for those of you who think and are worried that what I'm saying is somehow blasphemous against God and is trying to deter someone from God, that couldn't be further from the truth. Because throughout all of my studies, I have to say that my belief and love of God and of Jesus has strengthened even more, because I see a deeper aspect of how things are working. It helps me to understand a bit more of how strong Jesus was to stand up to this evil, to know that he was on this earth surrounded by all of this evilness that was here, and yet he stood up to it. Stood up to it and encouraged those who were following him to stand up to it as well. So all these years later, here we are. We need to stand up to the evil in the same way that we were taught by Jesus and the other masters that were out there as well. Buddha, Krishna, many teachers and masters and disciples and spiritual beings have taught us how to move through life to take out the evil. One last thing I want to leave you with here before we go. This is a piece for you to listen to. This is Father Malachi Martin on demons and occult magic. Father Malachi Martin at one time was the exorcist over at the Vatican. However, he left the Vatican after he experienced cardinals doing satanic rituals inside the Vatican. He knew at that point Satan had entered and there was a problem and it was his time to go. He wrote a book about the subject. This is an interview he did with Art Bell, and it's well worth your time in looking at this, because we certainly need to be able to get to the heart of what is going on with all of this evil stuff that's out there. All of these evil intentions. We need to understand so we could stand up to it. So, in closing, let's just close by, just taking a moment, close our eyes, just imagine ourselves as beings that are feeling all the energy all around us. Let's just imagine ourselves filling with light and just allowing this light and love in ourselves to go out and expand into the world, to bring peace, to bring calmness, to bring hope, to alleviate fear. And let's just be a light and let our light shine bright as we go forth this weekend, just to relax, let go of all the problems and challenges so we can be clear and focused as we go forward. I ask all these things, Heavenly Father, in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for being here, my friends. I will be back next week. Same time, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or Pacific Daylight Time, whichever one that is. That's it for me. It's been a good week. Glad to be back, and I will talk to you soon. Relax. Enjoy your weekend. Peace. I'm out of here.